On the next episode of
Mimi sioni faida ya kuishi mama. Hebu mama niambie ukweli, kwa nini ulikuja na mimi kwenye nyumba? Kwa nini baba hanipendi?
Sitamkie maneno hayo.
Nimesema ondoka bwana. Amka. Ondoka hapa. Inuka ukakae kule. Nini wewe?
Ni kweli? Jamaa mpigo miaka 10 gerezani, alafu wajua mpigo faini hizi milioni 3.
This weekend on KBC Channel 1.
This week on Wake Up and Make Up, it's going to be a girly girl affair. Cheers! We continue to munch on what I would call a starter before our main course at Chef U's Sushi Bar. This is what makes the coffee so special. We actually have a real gold leaf.
Wow.
I don't think we should drink it. We should probably gather it and take it to a jail. Can I make a run out of it? We can make a cargo. Get some tips on how to enjoy a day's out with the girls.
On the next episode of Behind Closed Doors.
Only thing I want is to get out of here alive.
Too late.
Emilio, help me! Help me! Gonzalo took Diego.
Where's that phone? Give it to me. Give it to me now.
Let go of me!
Uwanjani.
Well, a very good evening to you. We sure hope that you are keeping well this 12th day of November 2020, a day when after 6 months since a postponement, the president finally got to address the nation, giving the State of the Nation address, and that was postponed because of COVID-19. COVID-19 in itself just giving quite precedence in that State of the Nation address, from how it has impacted livelihoods to just the economy and how the government is planning to ensure that the economy recovers. We have the details of that State of the Nation address and much more stories from the local scene as well as the international front. But first, here are today's highlights. Moving to reset the education baton, President Uhuru Kenyatta gives the Ministry of Education 14 days to come up with a plan to reopen schools.
Leaders must reach out to each other and build bridges over turbulent waters to allow the people to cross into safety and prosperity.
Pitching for the BBI report, leaders challenged to engage in candid debate on the future of this nation.
We must not succumb to COVID fatigue. We must not backtrack from our vigilant fight against this pandemic.
And it is not time to lower the guard. President Uhuru Kenyatta calls on leaders to be frontline soldiers in combating COVID-19 pandemic. I am Betty Kiptum, and Byron Abuli is my colleague on the sign language interpretation. Let's start the bulletin. Now, President Uhuru Kenyatta has directed the Ministry of Education to announce the 2021 academic calendar within 14 days. During his State of the Nation address, the head of state said the government is carefully monitoring the gradual and phased reopening of schools, which began with the examination classes, to ensure young Kenyans are safe and secure as they continue preparing for their national examinations. Ben Chumba reports.
In his 7th State of the Nation address, President Uhuru Kenyatta acknowledged the ravages of the COVID-19 on the education sector.
As a parent and also as a grandparent, I share in the pain and frustration of most parents in having our children home for nearly an entire year. However, as a responsible government, we put the health and safety of the children as the paramount consideration.
The President further directed the Ministry of Education to provide details on the planned reopening of the other classes.
The gradual and phased reopening of schools that began with the examination classes is being carefully monitored at all levels so as to ensure that our young Kenyans are safe and secure as they continue preparing for their national examinations. The Ministry of Education will, within 14 days of the date hereof, announce the 2021 academic calendar, with all other classes expected to resume learning in January of 2021.
In observing the COVID-19 protocols in schools, the government has funded production of 250,000 school desks, at least 12,500 new classrooms and related school facilities.
The Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Transport, Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development have been instructed that by the 1st of December 2020 to issue a new set of building guidelines for school infrastructure that allows the use of appropriate and cost-effective building technologies suited to the varied geographies of our nation.
Despite these challenges, the President appreciated achievements in 100% transition from primary to secondary school and gradual phase-out of the 844 education curriculum.
At the end of 2019 calendar year, we had been able to achieve a textbook-to-pupil ratio of 1:1 for grades 1 to 3. I assure this distinguished sitting that the journey to replace the 844 system with a new fit-for-purpose curricula is well underway, and refinements are being undertaken in the course of implementation.
He reiterated his call on Kenyans to remain vigilant against coronavirus, noting its resurgence has raised the death toll to 1,154 lives since its outbreak in March this year. On health, the government is keen on expediting implementation of the universal health coverage pillar of the Big Four agenda.
As we inch closer to the national rollout of the universal health coverage, I also, a fortnight ago in Mombasa, launched the biometric registration for the Universal Health Coverage Scheme. Similarly, my administration is instituting far-reaching reforms of NHIF as it perfects the medical insurance scheme.
The worrying crisis of mental health in the country saw the President issue an executive order on the first formal mental health response plan.
I have issued an executive order establishing an ultra-modern national mental health hospital and also elevated Mathare National Teaching Referral Hospital as a semi-autonomous specialized hospital.
Ben Chumba, reporting for Channel 1 News.
Still giving you a detailed analysis of that State of the Nation address, President Uhuru Kenyatta has called on Kenyans to engage in a positive discourse on the Building Bridges Initiative report. Making his 2020 State of the Nation address, the head of state said Kenyans should constructively and objectively consider the recommendations in the report that seeks to address the perennial challenges facing the nation, which include negative ethnicity, inclusion, equitable resource sharing, and the fight against corruption. The President insisting that the country must seize the constitutional moment to safeguard the country for future generations.
As the Building Bridges initiative progresses to the next phase of implementation, President Uhuru Kenyatta is urging all Kenyans to constructively and objectively consider the recommendations in the report. The President insisting that major changes are needed in the Constitution and other laws so as to lay the foundation for the prosperous future of the nation.
With a view to effecting far-reaching changes that will address the perennial challenges that we have faced as a nation, the challenges of negative ethnicity, inclusion, equitable development, and indeed our fight against corruption.
The President calling on political leaders to reach out to each other and build bridges over turbulent waters to allow the people to cross into safety and prosperity.
We have learned as Kenyans that elections alone cannot bring peace and unity to a divided people. For that, leaders must reach out to each other and build bridges over turbulent waters to allow the people to cross into safety and prosperity.
The President cautioned politicians on the wages of bad politics, but focused on including the young and desperate, not inciting them to revolt against their country and their elders.
They need a politics in which competition is not turned into enmity and war. They need political leaders focused on including the young and desperate, not inciting them to revolt against their country and their elders.
He reminded Kenyans that this nation is greater than an individual and a nation that is a beacon of hope and an icon of stability in the volatile regions. President Kenyatta said Kenya is acting as a role model in progressive African social democracy and that these qualities are not inherent and must continuously be watered from the well of the nation's commitment to make it better, brighter, and more inclusive for all.
This moment in time is our meeting with destiny. When generations come long after we are gone, let them say that we made the right decisions at this moment, that we chose unity over division, that we dreamt of and birthed a happier, more harmonious and prosperous nation. Kenya, honorable members, is greater than any individual.
From this front, he called on Parliament to prioritize the consideration of various seminal bills that are pending before the legislature, such as the Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendment Bill and proposed legislation on the administration of referenda and on enhancing governance.
Also before the House is the Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendments Bill, the Business Amendment Bill number 2 of 2020, and the proposed legislation on the administration of referenda and on enhancing governance and on deepening our anti-corruption efforts.
Suleiman Yeri, Channel 1 News.
Now to the latest on the pandemic. President Uhuru Kenyatta is pleading with Kenyans not to lower their guard on the fight against COVID-19. The president said Kenyans must not succumb to the COVID-19 fatigue and must remain vigilant at all times in the fight against the pandemic. The head of state challenging leaders to walk the talk and lead in the fight against the pandemic and lauding health workers who have given their all. The president's sentiments come as the country recorded another 23 deaths with 919 new confirmed cases within the last 24 hours.
While delivering his State of the Nation address in the midst of extraordinary health disruptions in the country occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic, President Uhuru Kenyatta noted that though the containment measures adopted in the country in reducing the spread of COVID-19 have played a key role in stemming the transmission rate, the country is still glaring at a tough battle. The president calling on the nation not to tire but keep up the fight by observing all laid down protocols. The head of state challenged leaders to lead the way and not diminish the stamina for discipline in the fight against the invisible enemy.
But fellow Kenyans, we are yet to get out of the woods. And so I urge all Kenyans to keep doing that which is honorable and right. It is my plea to this House and to all Kenyans that we must not succumb to COVID fatigue. We must not backtrack from our vigilant fight against this pandemic. And on our part, as leaders, our stamina for discipline must not diminish. If the people fall short of giving their best at this time, we, the leaders, have no option but to give our all.
His sentiments are coming on a day the country recorded another 23 deaths with 919 new cases from 6,135 samples tested over the same period. The head of state used his address to laud the Kenya health workers who have been on the front line in fighting the pandemic, saying they have gone beyond the call of duty to save Kenyans.
And sadly, also a total of 1,203 deaths since this tragedy fell upon us, out of which we can say that 23 persons succumbed to the disease over the last 24 hours.
The head of state was, however, categorical that it was too soon for members of the public to drop their guard in the fight against COVID-19, stressing on individual responsibility as the number of fatalities and infections rise at an alarming rate. From the new confirmed cases, Nairobi leads with 345, followed by Mombasa at 98, Nakuru 76, Kilifi 74, and Kiambu 44. In the last 24 hours, 414 patients were given a clean bill of health, 316 from home-based care program, while 98 were discharged from various hospitals. Currently, 1,279 patients are admitted in various health facilities across the country. 60 are in intensive care unit and 18 at high dependency unit. Kamchemenza for Channel 1 News.
Now, President Uhuru Kenyatta has urged Parliament to prioritize the passing of the National Aviation Management Bill, which once enacted will anchor the turnaround of debt-distressed Kenya Airways. While delivering his 7th State of the Nation address, the President further underscored the importance of creating more avenues for young people in wealth creation.
The government has embarked on the nationalization of the loss-making national carrier, Kenya Airways, in a bid to turn around the fortunes of the airline. The proposed entity entails the formation of the Kenya Aviation Holding Company Limited with 4 subsidiaries.
I urge Parliament to prioritize the consideration of various seminal bills that are pending before the legislature, such as the National Aviation Management Bill, which once enacted will anchor the turnaround of the pride of Africa, our national carrier, Kenya Airways.
During this year's State of the Nation address, President Uhuru Kenyatta urged Parliament to prioritize the consideration of various minor bills that are pending before the legislature, such as the National Aviation Management Bill, which, once enacted, will anchor the turnaround of the national carrier, Kenya Airways. If the bill sails through, it would reduce the risk profile of KQ, which would aid in renegotiating KQ's craft leases, ultimately reducing the operating costs. Now, operating costs under the holding company, KQ would enjoy concessional rates of taxation. Youth empowerment also took center stage, with the president denoting government's objective to shift the country's young people from being earners of wages to owners of capital, leveraging on capacity building.
We have worked hard to give youth self-esteem and a sense of purpose. And we have done this because dignity comes from self-reliance and a sense of contributing to society. If the youth are given a sense of national importance, they will own the country and guard it jealously as active shareholders.
So far, 430,598 students enrolled into 182 technical vocational training colleges across the country.
The curricula for these institutions has been developed in partnership with industry stakeholders in varied sectors of our economy, ranging from the automotive industry oil and gas, maritime and shipping, to agro-processing.
President Kenyatta also encouraged border riders to engage in saving schemes and to work together in order to increase capital base that will enable them expand their businesses.
That border riders can come together and become owners of capital and holders of major investments. We are encouraging them to engage in saving schemes.
This comes in the wake of the launch of the Border scheme, meant to bring together 1.4 million riders with an aggregate contribution of 357 billion shillings a year. The president further outlined various projects like the Likoni floating bridge.
That will be the first automated floating bridge in Kenya. The Likoni floating bridge will help to decongest ferry transport at the Likoni Channel in the context of the COVID-19 safety concerns and beyond, by providing a safe pedestrian connectivity from Liwatoni on Mombasa Island to Ras Bofu on the Likoni mainline side.
In conclusion, the president maintains that Kenya's economy remains resilient despite the COVID-19 disruptions.
In other words, economic development is the measure of the tangible, positive transformation of the well-being and the quality of life of our people.
Regina Manyara reporting for Channel 1 Business Insight.
And a section of leaders from across the political divide is expressing satisfaction with the efforts put in place by the government to manage the COVID-19 pandemic, emphasizing the need for all players to collaborate in the implementation of economic recovery plans after the health crisis. This even as some underscored the president's call for unity and national cohesion as the country seeks a more stable political environment.
In the overall, the president has talked about very many issues, but I would say that he has very eloquently stated where the problem is. As Kenyans, we know what maladies are ailing us. The question now coming out of this speech is whether we are offering the right medicine for the maladies that have been diagnosed, because he has talked about all the maladies that Kenya is suffering from, up to and including the new malady of COVID that has hit us. The question is, are we applying the right sebum, the right medicine, the right panacea for these maladies?
For us to be a stable economy, then we need to be more producers than consumers. I think that is a powerful message that I would like to re-echo to all Kenyans, that it is high time we stopped thinking that we are developing or we are economically stable by importing things from elsewhere to consume. It is better we produce. However crooked our production system is, we would rather produce. Number two, in the terms of job creation, he is calling upon all the youth with talents and skills and whatever they can employ to start small and micro enterprises, which the government will be willing to support.
Today, there are 70% of our citizens are youthful, and it is a clear attempt during the four-point agenda of the president to ensure that the youth now become employers, not just employees or people who live from hand to mouth. They will have funds through government intervention to enable them now to be able to grow and run their own business and manufacture businesses, and with the support of the government.
One of the key things that I, as a representative of the people from Lamu County, is that the president have noted and have told the whole nation that Lamu Port is progressing very well. The first berth is done and the second two berths are almost complete. And for us, Lamu people and the coastal people, this is one of the greatest milestone achievement that we will remain to remember.
President ametushawishi ama ametuomba tafadhali kama inawezekana tutumie pesa za CDF kuhakikisha kwamba tujenga mashule na tuhakikisha kwamba tumenunua desk, ndipo watoto wanaporudi shule Januari wako na mahali pa kwenda kusoma. Kwa constituency yangu hasa mimi ambaye niko na shida ya mashule na desk, mimi nahakikisha kwamba nitajenga shule zingine 3 kwa vile kwa sasa na shule moja tu ya secondary.
We know our kids have lost 1 year. What is it that the president is going to do to ensure those traumatized children out there who have been at home for 1 year are going to recover their 1 year. What strategies? Because if you don't then recover 1 year, it means generations to come will be behind schedule for 1 year, by 1 year. Yeah. So we President must come out with the strategies on how we are going to recover. Like during the Moise era, you remember there was a double intake when university students backlog came because of 82 coup.
Well, we now take a quick short break, but when we come back, we shall be discussing that State of the Nation address and what it means for you. We shall be having Reginald Kadzutu. He is an economic and policy analyst. Do stay tuned for that. See you after the break.
When the world changed, it made us go back to the simple joys and love the little things even more, like serving up your best, eating together, and sharing more. Now, we'll take nothing for granted and always remember to taste the simple joys. Coca-Cola, taste the simple joys.
On the next episode of Corner.
If you can keep something this important from me, you obviously think there's stuff I can't handle.
Na kitu mbaya na Jimmy kuwa akizunguka nyumba kama ghost.
I think what I really need is a friend. Someone who understands me.
Get your bar request safety deposit box finally.
Huyu Jimmy anakufanya ufanye kazi za nyumba ni kama wewe ni mtumwa, eh?
There's a clause that the gym and whatever falls under it go together. You cannot split it.
Yo, muliitisha mtu wangu na tukawapatia.
Mwenzako I feel so good, pindi nikikuona.
Top Mashariki, mpango mzima, kipindi ambacho kinakupatia burudani katika kanda Afrika Mashariki. Ukiwa na mie Munyi Kazungu hapa, nite kaka mkubwa na kuletea mahanja. Ungana na mimi Munyi Mtetezi Kazungu kila siku ya Ijumaa kuanzia mida ya saa 4 usiku. Top Mashariki freestyle au sio, ni take over.
Welcome back. You are watching Business Insight. This is a special coverage of the State of the Nation address. Now we have in studio Reginald Kadzutu. He is an economic and policy analyst, and we would like to just delve into the meaning of that particular State of the Nation address, especially what it means to the economy. Reginald, you listened to this particular address by the President. What do you make of those pronouncements?
Thank you, Betty. I think the first key thing is to actually set what the state of the nation is. After listening to the president for some few seconds, I was wondering which nation is he talking about, because the true state of the nation is a nation that you have close to 60-70% of people still using charcoal, firewood, and paraffin for cooking. The true state of the nation is where you have close to 60-70% of the people still using pit latrines as a form of waste disposal. The state of the nation is where you have less than 20% of the people that have access to to piped water. People are still using water from dams, rivers, lakes, and wells.
All right.
The true state of the nation is where you have majority of the people, their houses are still made out of mud, cow dung, or stone with mud, and all. So if you look at the reality of what is there on the ground in terms of the status of the nation, then it becomes very hard to marry the president's speech to what is actually the status of the nation as a country. So I would have expected the president to address some of these things, but from his address, he seemed to pick big business over people.
Big business over people. Well, to be fair to him, he was pretty honest about the condition of the country in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, how that has impacted livelihoods, and just what the government is doing or has been doing for the past 8 or so months to make sure that people are at a better place than they could be if they were just left to suffer. What do you think? Do you think that the government has done enough during this COVID-19 period to ensure that people can at least survive through this pandemic?
I will not agree that they've done enough, especially on the economic side. My theory is that, number one, they misdiagnosed the issue to be a liquidity problem. I think you've heard the president mentioning it many times in his speech, that to sort out liquidity, but the crisis that we are facing as a country, or the crisis we were getting into, was actually going to be an income crisis. Income crisis by that people's incomes were going to disappear, corporate income was going to disappear. So if you look at the number of jobs that have been lost, so that is income that has been lost. So when people lose jobs and income is also lost, aggregate demand in the economy also drastically drops. So you end up in a vicious cycle where they continue to shed more jobs, and the aggregate demand continues to drop, and now you get companies closing down or scaling down on production. So what the government should have done is, how do you substitute that income that has been lost, or how do you sort out that aggregate demand that has gone missing in the economy? So the government should have played the role of the largest aggregate demand during this period. So the measures of reducing tax, for example, yes, you've reduced tax, but I've lost my job. So that tax break is not actually going to help me. If you give me more money because you've reduced my PAYE, it does not mean I'm going to order 4 loaves of bread. If I only take 1 loaf of bread, I will still continue taking 1 loaf of bread. The rest, most probably, I'll put it under the pillow, put it in the bank. The bank takes it and gives it to the government in terms of buying government bonds. The government goes to pay salaries, or some of it is taken by corruption. So I think the government misdiagnosed the problem and put measures that have actually not helped people, especially on the side of income and protecting jobs.
Okay, and just to link it to what you've spoken about, the loss of income, there was the issue of the ease of doing business, about 400,000 jobs being registered annually. He said that during the corona period, 300 jobs, or not jobs, rather businesses, were being registered on a daily basis. Based on these numbers, do you think that it reflects the improvement in ease of doing business, or is it just a reflection of the desperation that is going on within the people after losing their jobs and maybe their sources of income?
If you use a statistic of saying people have registered a company, registering a company does not mean the company is operational. I can just register a company for the sake of having or protecting the name, keeping the name on the side, or to try and get into a tender or something. If you want to really measure your ease of doing business, you try to look how much foreign direct investment is coming into the country, with people coming either to set up manufacturing plants here or set up offices here. If that number was 200 a month, then we'll say yes, all the efforts around ease of doing business are working. But if you look at the cost of electricity in Kenya alone, we are not competitive in the region, and even in the continent, we are not even in the top 15 in terms of cheap electricity. 2, our tax regime is very punitive, and it has a lot of uncertainty. It changes every fiscal cycle. Every year the CS for Treasury is giving a budget. There's a whole overhaul of the taxation. So even just based on those 2 things, the number 56 of ease of doing business, if it does not translate into companies coming here or businesses that we are seeing that, because when a business is registered, ideally we are expecting that people are going to be employed. But if we're having businesses that are not creating employment, then those businesses are not helpful to the economy at all.
So he spoke about the issue of the production being a production-based country and not a net importer of goods. You've spoken about the cost of energy and the ease of doing business. What more can be done to ensure that we reach that point where we are maybe net exporters and not net importers?
I think the government needs to first accept the state of the nation. The condition that we are in. Secondly, then the government needs to accept the comparative advantages that we have as a country. Majority of our people are in the rural areas. Majority of the people are employed in the agricultural sector. Our manufacturing sector is 80 to 90% agro-processing. So our manufacturing sector cannot operate without the agricultural sector. But if you look at the funding that goes to the agricultural sector, it has been dropping. I think it's around 3%. The Maputo declaration says it's supposed to be at 11%. So if we are going to see moving us from being net importers to net exporters, then we need to look at where we actually have a comparative advantage, which is the agricultural sector. We are not going to export Volvo cars. As much as we are attracting Volvo to set up manufacturing plants, we are not going to export a Volvo car here to the region, because it's cheaper for them to import it from elsewhere. So how then do we increase our production yields from the land that we have? How do we mechanize? It is shameful to say right now that the land under irrigation versus the agricultural land is 0.04%. That shows you the level of mechanization that we have, where the largest sector of the economy is dependent on God. If he sends rain and he keeps the locust away. There's no policy that is actually being put in place to actually make sure that we are mechanizing the agricultural sector, to increase the incomes in the agricultural sector, which will impact 70% of all the people that are employed. When those incomes start growing up, the surplus income can now go to the other manufacturing sector, adding value. You talked about cotton, you talked about Rivertex. If you look at cotton right now, most of our EPZs that do exports to the US of apparel, most of that cotton is imported. And I'm thinking it's not sustainable. Why not find a piece of land where we are saying we are growing cotton because we want to focus on apparel making, on clothing. So I think there's a lot of no policy that is really directed towards saying step by step we are going to move in this direction. And I like one thing that he said is that some of these things cannot be done in one presidential cycle. But our problem is that we always try to do everything in one budget cycle. You want to do the whole Galana in one budget cycle. You want to do laptops in one budget cycle. You want to do SGR in one budget cycle. You want to do Nairobi's Express road in one budget cycle. What does that lead to? It leads to debt and more debt and more debt. And more debt.
Well, he spoke about the pending bills in the parliament, and one of them is the National Aviation Management Bill, which, if enacted, will see KQ nationalized. What are your thoughts about that?
I don't think nationalizing KQ is the only solution to Kenya Airways. There are a lot of things that Kenya Airways needs to go through the process. Nationalizing KQ is a good step in the right direction if it gets the benefits that come with nationalization. If they're not going to give KQ tax breaks, if they're not going to give KQ VAT breaks on their fuel, if they're not going to waive the lending rights and the lending costs for KQ at JKIA, then this nationalization will still keep KQ running a loss. So if they're going to nationalize it, they need to then look at what is ailing KQ. Ailing KQ is not because it's a private company. It's because of, one, it's heavily taxed. Two, there's a lot of privilege that goes on at Kenya Airways that needs to be fixed, and I'm sure the current CEO is doing quite a good job on that. They need to optimize the cost for running the airline, their employee cost, their running cost of the aeroplanes, because it's profitable. If you look at the revenue that they generate, you realize KQ actually generates a lot of revenue. They actually generate revenue to the level of close to the same level as Safaricom. If nationalizing means also the government is going to wipe out all the debt, then it will make sense. But if they just nationalize for the sake of bringing it under a parastatal, we all know how the government runs parastatals. Look at Kenya Power, look at Ketraco, look at the sugar farms, look at most of the things that the government owns as parastatals, they all end up running losses. So unless they nationalize KQ and treat it the same way they treat Safaricom, then we will not see a real change coming through in Kenya Airways.
Right. Back to the issue of the COVID-19 management. You said that it is more of an income issue than a liquidity issue, rather. Now, are there any international models that have been used by other countries during the management of this COVID to ensure that money is in the people's pockets, and maybe something that Kenya would have borrowed from?
If you look at most of the developed countries, we can take the US, for example. Donald Trump was signing checks to give to people, to the majority of the people. Here in Kenya, it's shrouded in mystery. Who is actually getting these 2,000, 4,000 things that they give per week? Is it even enough? So if you look at a stimulus package of 50-something billion that the president mentioned, in an economy of 9.9 trillion, that's less than 1%, 2% of what we of our GDP. It's not going to actually have an impact. So you either do income substitution, which is what the US did. They also printed money straight into the stock market, buying goods to make sure everything continues running. In Kenya, I think we've had a lot of talk, but we're actually not implementing some of the things that we're talking about. And I think the size of the stimulus was too little and targeted at, when you start getting young people cleaning trenches and picking litter in terms of kazi kwa vijana, in terms of helping them, then you delay paying them. Right now, even the desks that they ordered, we had the vendors complaining that they have not been paid for that time. So the stimulus package was little. There needed to be more of income substitution for the economy, and there had to be more of an aggregate demand. I would rather had the government going to say to UNGA, I will buy this amount of UNGA from you guys, so that UNGA keeps all their employees employed and keeps on producing. As UNGA keeps on producing, they will buy more maize from the farmer. The farmer then can keep their workers and pay their workers. All of a sudden, you're keeping the demand side of the economy running. And that way, it was going to be a bit better. So that it needed to be slightly bigger, close to 200, 300 billion for it to actually have an impact.
Okay, and moving forward, maybe, is there a way that a country can prepare for such a shock to the economy to just lessen the impact so that we are not where we are right now?
Reducing our indebtedness will be one good thing, because it gives the government room to borrow at a large scale, especially in cases of emergency like this. But with where our debt is close to 7 trillion, your room to even borrow drastically reduces. Number two, if universal health care, which he mentions in his Big Four, makes sense if it is implemented well, because then you will not be fearing right now. Everyone will have an NHIF card that actually pays for COVID, not just for the sake of we are being cut for NHIF and doesn't do anything. If they had taken enough time to actually upgrade our hospitals, to make sure that we have facilities to handle such type of pandemics and the skill sets to handle such type of pandemics. If you look at the people that are churned out of our universities, we are churning out close to 1.5, 1.7 million anthropologists, philosophy, accountants, finance guys. Where are the scientists? Why are we waiting for a vaccine from elsewhere? So there's a lot of investment that needs to go into research and development in the health ministry. The infrastructure needs to increase on a nationwide scale, so that when a pandemic comes, you have the capacity to actually handle it without having to now saying, oh, we need to make hospital beds, or you need to create hospitals in 2 weeks or in 3 weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
So as we come to a close of this, what would be your parting shot?
Parting shot that I'm not sure which nation the president was addressing in the State of the Nation. I believe our state of leadership is to bury our heads in the sand and assume everything is well. But based on the statistics that I've just shared here, and which are just a few of them, you realize what we're trying to do as a government does not actually address the problems that we have on the ground. And I think it comes from where policy needs to think of people and stop thinking of goods, roads, railways, and actually think of people. Then you realize the policies we'll make as a country will be policies that actually address the problems that Kenya actually faces.
That Kenya actually faces. Thank you very much, Reginald Kadzutu, there for speaking with us. He is an economic and policy analyst, and we have been talking about matters the State of the Nation address, just giving his views on those numbers shared by the president, what they mean and what the president could do to better the situation. We now move on to other news. The Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops and the Ufungamano Joint Forum of Religious Organizations are calling for consensus building on contentious issues in the Building Bridges Initiative report to incorporate inclusivity. The church leaders want the political class to drive the BBI course with sobriety and refrain from divisive sentiments.
The Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops say divided political leadership has polarized the Building Bridges Initiative discourse, while in Nakuru, the church urged political leaders to unite and enlighten the electorate to inclusive amendments of contentious clauses. The leaders want the report to be subjected to a thorough review by various stakeholders to end social and economic problems bedeviling the country.
Saa hizi kila kitu ni imported. Tunajaribu tuanze uchumi wetu ambao tunaweza kutoa tunazalisha mali sisi na buy Kenya, build Kenya. So tunahitaji tafakari ya pamoja.
The church leaders are opposing the proposed executive constitution that confers an elected president the power to appoint a prime minister and 2 deputies, terming the move imperial presidency.
BBI ingekuta soft spot kuendeleza, na naamini inawezekana. Tukiona hela nyingi zitatumika kwa upande gani, unaona kwamba zinalenga sehemu ya wanasiasa zaidi. Watu wamebeba, tufanyeje tuwapunguzie mzigo wa uzito wa uchumi? Tukiongezea wabunge zaidi, haileti huduma zaidi.
This as the Ufungamano Joint Forum of Religious Organizations opposed the increase of legislative seats in Parliament and the Senate as proposed in the report, while in Nairobi the clergy said the electorate is already overrepresented in the 2 houses.
The number of constituencies and elected members of the National Assembly be reduced to 150, down from the current 290. In many countries, the MPs not only represent a much larger constituency, but give a very high level of service.
Irene Mchuma Udim, Channel 1.
When the world changed, it made us go back to the simple joys and love the little things even more, like serving up your best, eating together, and sharing more. Now, we'll take nothing for granted and always remember to taste the simple joys. Coca-Cola. Taste the simple joys.
On the next, 2 lionesses struggle to cohabit.
Because I'm not going to stand here and be compared to some...
Hey, Nancy, don't try me.
As the coastal vacation brings Nancy and Joe closer.
Nancy, you are full of surprises. What would you like me to do for you this morning?
Or will it be?
Now, can you give us some space?
No. He? Ni usherati.
Watch your mouth, Mother Teresa.
Or what?
This game that you and Nancy are playing.
Na nyinyi mmekuwa akina nani kuingilia mambo ya wazazi wenu?
Stringed, making a comeback. Hotter.
You're just gonna stand there and stare at us?
How do you think things will end up here?
This is a conversation between your father and I.
Sometimes it would be good if you would just stand your ground.
Wait, Mtoto, wait. What happens between me and Mama Paul is none of your business.
Bolder.
You know Mama Paul is leaving you.
So what?
What? I'm done being your puppet and dancing to your tune and manipulation.
We called the clients and told them that the court has shut us down.
Only on KBC Channel 1. Fridays at 8:30 p.m.
Jumapili hii kwenye runinga ya KBC, ungana naye Askofu Michael Wanderi
wa kanisa la Christian Foundation Fellowship Kiambu kuanzia saa 1 hadi saa 2 asubuhi.
Ningetaka nikwambie, our Jehovah God, because the Bible says he is the same yesterday, today and forevermore. He is able to take you to a place of abundance. He is able to take you to Rehoboth in the name of Jesus Christ.
Kipindi ni neno la neema, ukiletewa naye Askofu Michael Wanderi wa kanisa la Christian Foundation Fellowship Kiambu. Usikose.
My trust is in you.
Thank you for staying with us. Let's now do the business. Labor and Social Protection CS Simon Chelugui says over 3.2 million households in the country are in urgent need of social services across the country as the COVID-19 pandemic puts a strain on Kenya's social protection systems. Further, Chelugui says 1.5 million people in Nairobi are facing hunger. Chelugui says increased unemployment and loss of income sources is pushing more Kenyans into the red and thus making resources scarce. Unemployment rate in Kenya shot from 5.2% to 10.4% between March and September 2020, rendering millions jobless and increasing the need for social protection. Labor and Social Protection CS Simon Chelugui says by the end of July, 230,000 redundancies in the formal sector had been recorded, with millions more affected who were undocumented from the informal sector.
In the informal sector, we have over 15 million people, and we don't have a register of the same. All of them have been affected. Aviation sector, floriculture, horticulture, the tourism sector have all been mostly affected. And these are the new vulnerables that we are dealing with in our ministry.
The government, NGOs and international bodies are calling for an integrated approach towards response to shocks that affect humanity in the scale of the pandemic.
We have to enhance our response to social protection to support these poor people and minimize the pain and the impact of this pandemic.
COVID has reminded us that we need to be well prepared for crisis situations. Although we may not have necessarily expected a pandemic on the scale which we've witnessed, I think it does remind us that we need to invest and support the creation of shock-responsive social protection systems.
Other than limited funding, another major challenge facing delivery of social services in Kenya is lack of skilled manpower. The government believes children ought to be kept in school to ensure they have a better chance at reaching tertiary level education and eventually use skills acquired in helping the community around them.
Keeping children in school ensures eventually they transit to tertiary institutions where they can gain skills and hence contribute to skilled workforce for the fulfillment of the Big Four.
The Social Protection Conference revealed that 1.5 million Nairobians are facing hunger, with over 3.2 million households in urgent need of social services across the country. Betty Kiptum, Channel 1 Business. Equity Group saw its net profit during the first 9 months of this year reduced by 14% to 15 billion shillings, weighed down by higher loan loss provisioning. The lender increased its loan loss provisions by 11 times to 14.3 billion shillings that pushed up its operating costs.
Confirmation of the first case of COVID-19 late March saw the government come up with ways of cushioning the public. Among the measures was a loan repayment holiday for borrowers, as well as encouraging banks to allow customers to renegotiate their loan repayment schedules. This has affected the profitability of banks that have to increase their loan loss provisioning. For Equity Bank, the loan loss provision increased 11-fold to 14.3 billion shillings. This was after the stock of the gross non-performing loans increased 170% to 51.8 billion shillings. The loan loss provisioning pushed Equity Bank's total operating costs by 43% to 58.1 billion shillings. This saw the bank post a 14% reduction in net profit during the first 9 months of this year to 15 billion shillings. Meanwhile, National Bank of Kenya has also posted a decline in net profit, 535 million shillings previously to 87 million shillings for the 9 months ending September 2020. This represents a 77% reduction that the bank attributes to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. But unlike other lenders, NBK's total non-performing loans and advances reduced 15% to 23.3 billion shillings. NBK Managing Director Paul Russo, however, said that the bank remains cautiously optimistic about the future as it continues to invest in revamping its channels. And KCB Group reported a 43% drop in Q3 net profit to 10.9 billion shillings. The performance was largely impacted by increased provision on loans and advances in the wake of increased risk of credit default associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. During the period, non-funded income rose by 300 million shillings to 21.3 billion shillings, impacted by the reduction in loan disbursement to mobile customers during the period. The proportion of non-branch transactions stood at 98%, up from 95% a year earlier, driven by mobile internet and agency banking. KCB is projecting recovery as the East Africa region finds some stability in living with the effects of the virus. Alan Aoko, Channel 1 Business.
Now, 5 fintechs that were shortlisted to participate in Cooperative Bank's Akili Kali Innovation Challenge have been undergoing a 5-week co-development and co-design program aimed at developing solutions that will benefit the cooperative movement. The winner of the challenge will pocket a cash reward of up to 5 million shillings and an opportunity to integrate and launch their innovation with Cooperative Bank.
The shortlisted fintechs are Awama 360 Kenya, Herufi Technologies, Jamboro, Smart Matatu, and Chamasoft that was selected by a panel of evaluators from a list of over 500 applicants who applied to collaborate with the Cooperative Bank in building the next generation of financial solutions beneficial to the cooperative movement and its membership of over 20 million Kenyans. The 5-week co-development and co-design program that they are undergoing will culminate in a virtual demo event to select one or more winners. The challenge, which is supported by the International Finance Corporation, will enable the Cooperative Bank to identify and partner with innovators who can rapidly deploy solutions to build value for cooperatives and enable them to serve their members more efficiently. The new innovations will also give cooperatives a competitive edge and strengthen their resilience in the rapidly changing financial landscape in Kenya, occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, the Agricultural Finance Corporation has launched a branch in Samburu, rallying residents to use their title deeds to secure loans for development instead of selling their land. The parastatal's chairman, Franklin Bett, urged employees of the institution to sensitize locals on the importance of tapping the loans offered by AFC.
Wafanyakazi wa kaunti wanaenda kwa kazi ya sensitization kwa mambo yao, watakuwa wanaandamana na watu wetu wa AFC ili waende kuelimisha wakulima juu ya mkopo ya AFC na faida yake. Faida yake ni kubwa. Umesikia ya kwamba interest sisi ni 10%, wale wengine 14%.
AFC is keen on financing Samburu residents grow their livestock herds or diversify to crop farming.
Now, Galana Conservancy is a window into the challenging but wonderful world of conservation and agriculture tourism. The Galana River cuts across the Galana Kulalu irrigation project and a wildlife habitat where game frequent to quench their thirst. Tonight on Magical Scenes, Irene Muchuma Odim highlights tourist attractions in Galana, Kilifi County.
The Galana Wildlife Conservancy stands east of Savo West National Park and can be accessed by air or road. The rough arid terrain may be challenging but adventurous. Repeat visitors say the journey is fit only for the strongest. Here, easy to spot animals include lesser kudu, dik-dik, and giraffes. This would simply be the ideal destination to reserve the decline in wildlife numbers in the Galana wildlife habitat.
Some they want to see birds, some they want to see the landscape, and some they are interested with the animals. Yeah. So what we do, we have been trained to read the guest. So we normally give what the guest needs. We read them, we know. For the first time, okay, for some kilometers when we start safari, we can read them, we can know what they want. So we try our level best to be flexible.
The Galana River cuts across this Galana Kulalu Food Security Project and the wildlife habitat.
As part of agricultural experiences, you are also able to visit and see how ranching is done by the Agricultural Development Corporation, which are really experts in that area. There's plenty of wildlife within the Galana Conservancy, which is right across the river. Beautiful, beautiful conservancy. Great work going on there, and plenty of wildlife as well, all the way up to the Lali Hills with beautiful, beautiful sunsets in the evening. It's a lovely, lovely place.
We have seen lions, 3 prides of lions. Actually, we can say, to this minute, we can say we've seen 15 lions. And this is out of the ordinary. The place is well kept, well maintained, and we are really enjoying in the goodness of the land of Kenya.
Wildlife frequent the river to quench their thirst, but this is not only a safe environment for the wildlife to roam free, but also provides limitless vegetation for growers to these parts of Kenya. The Galana Kulalu Food Security Project was unveiled in 2014 as a 1 million acre model farm. The farm aims at driving Kenya's food security agenda and increase agricultural exports. Visitors to Galana would equally benefit from agricultural studies besides a personal experience of the African bush. This area is also an ideal bird spotting site. Irene Mchuma Odim, Magical Sense in the county of Kilifi.
Now, land compensation is the major hurdle stalling completion of the Dongo-Kundu bypass and special economic zone. Kenya National Highways Authority Deputy Director Engineer Samuel Ogege says the government is fast-tracking processes for compensation of 300 families whose land is on the project site.
The Dongo-Kundu Bypass and Special Economic Zone project is one of the flagship projects of Kenya's Vision 2030, and upon completion, it is expected to create over 60,000 direct jobs. Phase 1 of the project is 100% complete, Phase 3 70%, while Phase 2 is 15% done as compensation of the 300 affected families slows progress.
It is a 4-year project. We are doing a lot of works concurrently. There will be a lot of works which is done off-site. A lot of pre-stressed concrete works will be done off-site. Then we shall come and launch them. Most of the materials for package 2, like the ones that are going deep into the sea, most of them have already arrived into the country. A lot of them have come from Japan and China, but they are already into the country, and we have started the piling works. That is the critical part. Once we are out of the piling works and we have done most of the concrete concrete works which we are doing off-site. We'll just carry them with cranes and then launch.
The second phase, launched March this year, which has 3 bridges, is expected to be completed in 48 months. The 7-kilometer phase 3 of the bypass project is expected to be completed by March the year 2021.
The whole road, starting from Miritini up to Kibundani, where it joins the road to Ukunda, is all 4-lane dual carriageway. This particular package, where we are now, is 7 kilometers. Other than linking us with the north, it is also going to link us with the Mombasa Special Economic Zone, commonly known as Dogokundu Economic Zone.
The Kenya Ports Authority is also set to establish a special economic zone at Dongokundu after affirming that the first berth of the new free port will be built soon. Reporting for Channel 1 Business News from Mombasa County, I'm Michael Mondiga.
Now, entrepreneurship is a venture that many walk into for various reasons, such as passion, income generation, or just by accident. Whatever the motivation, statistics show that it takes more than just starting a business venture to survive. With over 400,000 startups choking to death annually in Kenya, making it beyond the 5th anniversary is not a mean feat. I had a conversation with Flora Mutahi, the founder and chief executive officer of Melvin Marsh International, on what it has taken her to grow the company she founded 25 years ago to what it is today. Have a look. They say entrepreneurship is a lonely road, well, at least until the success comes in. Tonight, we want to have a conversation about matters entrepreneurship and with a lady who has walked this road for a strong 25 years. She is Flora Mutahi, the Chief Executive Officer as well as the founder of Melvin Marsh International Limited. And she'll be just speaking to us about her journey in entrepreneurship, her challenges and what it has taken to get here 25 years later. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you and good evening.
Good evening to you. Thank you for just giving us this opportunity. 25 years is not a short time. How has it been?
Well, I think at the beginning what tended to happen for me is entrepreneurship was not something that was celebrated. Actually, when I quit my job, which I only had for 9 months, and I said I want to go into business, even the word entrepreneurship was not a fancy word. Everybody sort of said, what's the problem? Did you not find a job? You know, who do you want us to talk to? And I kept saying, I want to get into business. And so during the journey, at the beginning, I had 2 people who gave me very, very good advice. One was the lecturer where I was doing my accounting exams. He said, please form a habit. Don't form a habit that will follow you the rest of your life. Because what I was doing is I was following a career for those 9 months that I was not committed to. So that was the best nugget of advice I ever got from somebody. And the second one was my boss at the time, who was Charity Muya. She just told me, whatever you do, build a legacy. This thing of, in today's world, I'll call it hustling, you know, trading and selling and doing this, you know, this and that. She said, build something that will stay and stand the test of time. So with those 2 pieces of nuggets, I then went and I saw an opportunity in free-flowing salt. In Kenya, we had salt that would cake when you use it. In fact, it was purplish at the time and damp. And I said, why don't we have free-flowing salt that comes out from the salt shaker? It's dry all the time. And I went to the labs and at the University of Nairobi, I learned how to do it. And that was actually my first product. Put it in the market, and then I realized, of course, there's no feasibility. Remember, I'm young, I have no experience. Put it in the market, and I realized, my goodness, this will never make me money. So as I did my first sale, which was 100 dozens to one of the big hotels, they told me, oh, see you, I'll pay you in 90 days. I was like, what? Again? It reminded me I didn't do my homework. I didn't know business cycles. I didn't know this is what happened. I thought you sell in the morning and be paid the next day. So I decided to harass them. So I went every day to say, please give me my money, please. So in that, I met a gentleman who was telling me his mom has started packing tea because the monopoly of 19 years that had been to one company had been lifted. Slowly, when I listened to what he was saying, I realized, wow, there's an opportunity in this. Within a few days, he also knew a lot of people in Mombasa. I went to Mombasa, learned about the trade, and got registered. I didn't even know what I was doing, but I got in. And again, very green, didn't know what was going on. But I did meet the people who were registering me, and they challenged me and they said, listen, how do you think you're going to survive against a multinational? I mean, somebody who had been in the trade for that long. And so when I got back home, I personally had a habit of drinking tea with ginger. And I kept thinking, I've got to do something different. Already you hear the salt, I was doing something different. So this one I said, it's got to be different. And that's when it hit me. Why don't I do tea and put ginger? Again, off to the University of Nairobi. I learned how to do that. Within no time, I'm off. And I started doing that. Okay. So I put up, I went to the university, put up I learned what to do, and voila, I had a product. Okay. But now, remember, this is somebody with no plan, no knowledge, no nothing. I had no capital. Okay. So, of course, I came home. I was young. I was still living at home. And I said, excuse me, I need to be supported. That was my biggest lesson in life. And they said, we took you to school. Mm-hmm. You have an education. You had a job. You quit. You're on your own. But it was the best lesson, in hindsight, obviously, that I got, because it woke me up to the reality of, what plan do you have?
What plan do you have?
I had none.
Right.
So then I decided, and I went around Nairobi until I found a Kenya Women Finance Trust were giving money to women entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. But if you had 100,000, they'll give you 200. Mm-hmm. So again, I came back home and I pleaded, flat no way. If you know what you're doing, go and do it. But I have a very entrepreneurial mother. So slowly, within 3 weeks, she, again, I was very persistent, and within 3 weeks, she wore down. And she took me to the bank and put up her security, and they gave me against that. Was it enough? No way. It was not even a third of what I needed, but it was what she could do. And I think, to be fair to her, I've already gone against what they really wanted of me, to get a job and get married. So she's like, listen, I'll give you a chance, but you've got to do it on your own. So with that, what I did is then I started stretching every coin I had. When I made the tea, I would go and pick my packaging. I make a run. They'll say minimum order is 100,000 pieces. So I say, make for me, very confidently. And then when they make it, I come back and I say, give me 10,000 for today. And then I write them a check. I know there's no money, but it's okay. It's okay. I write them a check, and then I write them 3, and I leave them. And I go to another supplier, and I did that. It was a game I used to play. But I was so driven to see this product in market. Yes. And I would actually I keep joking about it. It's well known out there. I would bounce even 5 checks a day. And then I'll call them back and say, I'm coming. But slowly, with a little first sale here and a little first sale there, it started making sense. Mm-hmm. So I used suppliers' money. I've now used the facility that I've been given. I then decided, my SACCO, I had a SACCO, and I had a little saving, of course, that I had started when I was working. Mm-hmm. I went and borrowed on that as well. My friend's mother also gave me money. So everything was just kidogo, you keep building.
Okay. Most people know Melvin from Melvin's Tea.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
That is the popular brand that you have.
Yeah.
But people do not know that you started with salt. So there you had to make some readjustments pretty early when you realized it's not going to work.
Within months.
Yes, within months.
Yes.
So that is a very important nugget that people need to pick up on, right?
Yes. Yes, you've actually got to look at the lay of the land. Obviously, had I been smarter and had I done and I did a business degree, but I think I had never sort of sat down and did my planning. But when I started doing my forecasting, this is after the product is ready, is when I started, because to get a bank loan, I had to do a business plan. That is when it dawned on me. When I ran my numbers, I was like, my goodness, this is not getting me anywhere. I mean, a ton of salt was less than 2,000, 3,000 shillings. So I was not going to go anywhere. And I remember I'm selling table salt. So yes, it's important to be agile. It's important to plan, have a business plan, look at your forecasts critically, study both your external environment and your internal environment. Do you even have the right capacity, the knowledge? I was fortunate enough that when I went to the University of Nairobi, I met a professor who was completely flawed by the fact that I've not been in food technology, but I want to enter the market, But he gave me the grace. Every afternoon, he would spend time teaching me the principles of food technology. When I got into tea, again, I didn't know anything about tea. There's no school you can go and learn about tea, despite tea being our largest foreign exchange earner in Kenya and a very widely grown crop. So what happened is I had to go to one of the big tea firms every day and taste over 100 cups of tea for 3 weeks. But I couldn't go as as a packer, I had to say I'm just a student. So these are the little things that we need to make sure as a country we are nurturing, so that we can actually, use the competitive advantage that we have as a country. Today, I think there's no excuse. Today, I think, anyway, maybe to the youth, maybe I was just young. Yes, one needs to do as much business planning, like I say, look at your external environment, look at your internal environment, walk the trade, realize where you're going to sell. Like for me, when I started selling, I went to modern trade because that's what I understood. So I went to the Chandarana at the time, I went to Uchumi, and, they'd take slowly. Then I start asking people what's going on. I met a friend of mine, Muhaki, and she was telling me, listen, what marketing are you doing in the stores? I'm like, what's that? So you learn about merchandising. So today, I think if I was to advise the youth, I'd be like, please learn the environment, sit with people who have done it before, study, and have a business plan before you do it. I did it the hard way, but I survived. I survived, but it was difficult. So now I put the product in the market, and it's moving very, very slowly. But so I decided, like I told you, she teaches me about marketing. So I said, oh, I see. So I had a little car. I sold that and bought a pickup. In fact, it had so little money. It was a left-hand drive pickup looking like a hearse. And what I did is I went and got Muse Ojwang and Maliwaza. And every weekend and the evenings, I would actually go to the markets with thermoses of tea, serve the ladies, and sell the product. So I did a lot of, you'd call it door-to-door. A lot of door-to-door. And then I remember Githurai at the roundabout was very busy even then. And would go there in the evening and finish your stock. So I used to be very proud of myself. If I leave with 40 cases, I make sure they're finished before I go back the next day. So it was very, 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 I walked the trade completely. When I did that is when I then started asking myself, what next? What next? And I met a gentleman who was working in Del Monte, and he told me, have you entered the general market? The general trade. And I was like, what is that? And slowly he explained to me general trade is where the wholesalers and the wholesaler, the retailer, down to the kiosk level. And he explained to me how to get a distributor and how to cost and all that. So I spent a lot of my time learning and executing like on a very short cycle. So I went off on that, and I did that for the next perhaps 2 years when the business was growing. But building a brand is not easy, especially when you don't have strong budgets, poor planning, So then what I did is I actually couldn't take the business anymore. Okay. And one day my mother is a co-director, and I told her, I'm out, I've gone. And she said, do you want to sell? I said, yes. And she found a buyer. And we put the business out, and she said, the meeting is tomorrow. So I called her in the morning. I said, I'm not sure. I want out yet, but I can't do this anymore. So what she did is she scaled down, because now we had a factory in the industrial area. She scaled down the business, brought it closer to where we live, and put in a manager. And for 1 year, I just went into, I'd call it hustling, doing everything else.
And what pushed you to that point where you want out?
In business, you also need to invest. But I didn't have the marketing money. So I was literally bootstrapping everything. Little bit I sell, I get an order, I sell. So it just wasn't making sense to me. So in that 1 year, we put in a manager, and we managed the costs a lot. And within a year, then we had to come back and sign some documentation. And when I came back, I looked at the bank balance. I was like, oh, okay, I'm back.
Okay, things were working out.
Things were working out now. So I did another couple of years, just increasing the flavors. We started with ginger tea, tangawizi. Then I remember there was a funding from USAID that said they would take us to the UK abroad. And my biggest vision when I started the company was to actually see Kenyan tea sold on shelves internationally, but packed in Kenya. So I went to this consultancy, and they said, how many flavors do you have? And I said, I've got ginger, very proud of myself. And we are the ones who started flavored tea in Kenya. I had this whole script for him. And he told me, please don't talk to us unless you have 4 flavors. So I had to come out with 4 flavors overnight. So down to market research. I went to those same markets. I asked the ladies, what would you like? What have you, and explaining that tea can be flavored was already a challenge. Yeah. So we would have to just guess what we think would work, go into the market, do our research, come back. So within about a couple of months, it was literally, the program was closing in 2 months. I came out with another 4 flavors. So I think we went into masala, cinnamon, and vanilla. And then we had the ginger and a plain tea.
Most households in Kenya have a thermos flask somewhere just with tea, waiting for either people of the household or visitors to take that tea. So what did it take to push that product now locally?
It took really putting the product in your hand or allowing you to taste, because our differentiation is ginger. So when you explain to people tangawizi tea, they don't understand it. So we had to literally go and do a lot of wet sampling. We call it wet sampling, where you sit in the supermarket and the ladies explain. I gave the teas out in the churches. I personally used to go to the markets. Kawangware market, I think, was on a Tuesday. I would go on a Friday and literally give people the tea. So it was putting the product in your hand. We also did a little bit of PR. Fortunately, I think entering the manufacturing space, I got a lot of offers to explain your journey a little bit. So we did a little bit of PR, so that got us around. But really, it was putting the product in the consumer's hand that actually made the difference. International market, similarly, a lot of it got promoted by people who have taken our product here and want to take the product there. So you get people from Japan saying, I was in Kenya, I tried your product. You get people from the US and such like countries. And even now, our largest ambassadors are Kenyans who have tried the tea. I mean, even just this morning, I got a message from somebody and said, I want it on Amazon in Florida. So basically, it's just really getting the product to somebody and getting the word out there.
Getting the word out there. Yes. So from this point of having to go and put it in people's hands or mouths, yes, to be specific, and now having people go to the shelves and get it themselves, what was the breakthrough? When did the breakthrough come?
I think about 5 years into the business. I think also in year 4, I also tried to sell the business again. Because again, it became a little bit difficult. But I would say within 5 years into the business, now it started, paying itself. We started being able to carve out marketing money. It started actually growing in the areas that we wanted it to grow. So all I would do is each year come out with business planning, train the team. I must say, another area that I was challenged as I was doing the business, funding was one of them. Another one was working with people. Purely because, yes, I had done business as a degree, but just getting the right people, your ability to recruit the right staff, motivate them, keep them, that was definitely a challenge. And I think still remains a challenge to date. But obviously, as you get bigger, you're able to afford more sophisticated tools and staff to be able to help you. Right. But it's definitely something that I would like to tell, SMEs, that it's something you need to pay a lot of attention, because your people are your biggest asset. Yeah.
And from the 5 flavors that you fronted, at the beginning, yes, of venturing into that international market, are there more that you've come up with, and how are those doing?
About maybe 8 or 9 years into the business, one particular day, 4 members of staff quit on a day, meaning they must have been talking about it. And it was a big shock because they were very key. One was in production, 2 were in sales, and I think 1 was in marketing. And that hit me very hard. And I went around immediately looking for solutions, because, of course, people leave the management, not necessarily the job. So I said, 4 people leave people, and managers. And that was myself. So I went out looking for an answer. And that is when I found a book called E-Myth by Michael Gruber that sort of said, you should not be working in your business, you should be working on your business. So it's not you to make sure you do everything. Put in systems where you employ people to do that. And you don't have to then manage them, because the system manages them. And your work is to actually see how to grow the business.
How did you get there? Expanding into those markets and the challenges that you face at this point now of that big growth.
I think the challenges remain almost the same. It's just the sophistication that you're able to attack them. Because if it is funding, funding now you can go to the bank and actually get your funding. But sometimes when interest rates come and whatever, it affects your bottom line. People, it's continuously, how do you continue to attract the right people and maintain them and keep them? We have had some people who have been with us for 17 years, 8 years. But it still remains a constant challenge. Product development, also now listening to the market, we've gone into this whole design thinking. It's not about what now I like. Remember, I did the ginger tea because I liked the ginger tea. I still do have a very discerning tongue and taste, so I'm always experimenting here and there and always saying, this is what I think we should do. But now it's about listening to the market. What does the market want, and giving the market what it wants. International marketing is definitely very, very expensive, difficult to do. So again, we are still working through people and seeing how we can best do it. COVID, of course, now has even made it a little bit more difficult. But of course, we are loving the new idea of online. So everybody really has switched a little bit more online. So even getting into those markets and promoting online will definitely be easier to do.
And from the 5 flavors that you fronted, at the beginning of venturing into that international market, are there more that you've come up with, and how are those doing?
Yes, definitely. You see, those were flavored teas. And incidentally, our claim to fame is we don't use artificial anything. If it is ginger, we mill it. If it's masala, we mill it and mix it. If it's so we went from flavored teas. We added cardamom and a few others. Then we went into herbal teas. I actually tried packaging neem and nettle. So we had Melvin's neem and Melvin's nettle tea. Until I realized people actually want to go and get it in the little polythene bag from someone. Not necessarily buy it in a supermarket. So that didn't do too well. But we then went into hibiscus. We've got hibiscus. We've got green teas with lemongrass, green tea with mint. And then we went into fruit flavors as well, berry blast. So we've gone like now the whole 9 yards, where we have flavored tea. We have gone into black tea as well. We have a new tea called Melvin's Premium. Well, we've tried Melvin's Premium. Then we went to Melvin's All Family Tea. This is the black tea market we were trying to cover, with no flavors. We now have Melvin's Pure Kenya Chai, doing very, very well, because people are relating to, these are the same Tangawizi people and they have a plain black tea. And we've gone into orthodox tea now and purple tea. So now we have the whole range. In fact, we say we play with your palate, whatever you feel like. You can wake up with Melvin's in the morning, have something after at tea time, lunchtime, and heading into bed, have your chamomile tea, which calms you.
You talked about when you were starting hiring people and maybe they lacked the knowledge. You also struggled with getting that knowledge in this area. Do you think that has improved right now? And what more can be done to ensure that the human resource in this sector, so to say, are well prepared and ready to take up the challenge?
Hiring staff when you're an SME is difficult because you barely have enough to run your own business, and you need to train them in the way you do things. You need to train them. I mean, if somebody has worked with you for a year, how are you building their capacity? Because next year you're bigger than you were before. So now that we are the size we are now, we have a strong training budget, but that was one of the challenges. But what I did during that time is I am constantly learning, and I think there's no other way for an entrepreneur to be than to be constantly learning. Because I always say, if I was in a multinational, they would be training me. So I have to train myself. And the question is, what do I train myself on? Nobody's there going to bring a docket and say, this is what you need to train yourself on. So you're just constantly scanning the land and realizing this is what I need to do, this is what I need to afford. And similarly with your team, and of course now we have HR departments that are able to do the skills gap analysis and decide we're going to train people in these areas. So that is what I'd have to say for that. But I want to talk about training now for entrepreneurial and entrepreneurs. Number one, I'd like to tell the older generation, when your child say they want to do entrepreneurial, please allow them. I mean, I thank my parents every day that they didn't fall into the trap. Because people are asking me, why? What happened? You're a failure. Why are you going to business? And they allowed me to be that. So it is an okay career. In fact, support it. And to the young entrepreneurs, what I would like to tell them is grow yourself. Learn what you want to do. Get early into that industry. Build a plan. Always be learning. Speak to those who have gone ahead of you because they have a lot of nuggets. They ask you questions that you have never thought. You're this horse in this horse race and nobody shows you this side and that side. But the more people you speak to, they'll always ask you a question and you go home and ask yourself, my goodness, I have never looked at it from that angle. So those are the real nuggets I would like to tell young entrepreneurs. Prepare yourself. Nobody owes you a living. And I think that's one of the things I see about it. We're not being given a chance. We don't sell a card in this idea. Nobody owes you a living. You chose that route, and it's a rough one. And it's lonely, it's difficult. But it is very rewarding. It is very rewarding when you go out there and look for your answers yourself.
So as we now come to a close of this conversation, what would be your closing remarks?
My closing remarks I would like to speak particularly to entrepreneurs because I think that's where my heart lies, would be to ask people to build a business model that is resilient. Nobody would have foreseen what we've gone through this year. And I am very aware there are some businesses that did not survive and will not survive. There are some businesses that have thrived. As an entrepreneur, you cannot allow yourself to remain there. We had to make a few adjustments, but fortunately being in food and I think having a natural product was an advantage for us. So we didn't have to do that. But I'm saying build a resilient, have a business with a resilient business model. Don't ever fear speaking to people. Keep learning all the time. Keep investing in yourself in whatever way possible.
That was Flora Mutahi. She is the founder and chief executive officer of Melvin Marsh International Limited that manufactures Melvin's tea. That's the popular tea brand that you know. And we have been talking about her entrepreneurial journey where she started with salt, moved to tea, and now she is an international brand, or rather Melvin is an international brand. Thank you very much for joining us here on Business Insight. Continue watching the program. Quite a pleasure there having that conversation with Flora Mutahi as an entrepreneur. I hope you've learned something. Let's move on to other news now. Kenya's credit rating could deteriorate in the coming months, according to the 2021 Moody's Sovereign Outlook. The rating agency has assigned Kenya a negative status on 60% of its sovereign debts, saying the risk of default is growing due to fiscal pressure occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic. This rating could make borrowing more expensive and elusive for Kenya.
Moody's Sovereign Outlook report says the global coronavirus pandemic-associated expenditures and revenue loss have led to widening fiscal deficits and record-high debt levels. According to the Outlook, Kenya is among 65 countries in the world whose sovereign credit worthiness will worsen in the year 2021, which calls for enhanced fiscal discipline. Kenya's economic conditions have worsened in the last 3 quarters after the country reported its first case of coronavirus mid-March this year. Millions of people have lost their jobs. Companies have embarked on a painful business retooling, which has impacted tax collection.
This year we are looking at a growth of about 6% of GDP, but this will drastically drop to about 3 or even less. But we are going to give a firm figure when we'll have taken it on board, the impact of this maybe in the next 1 month.
According to the Kenya Revenue Authority, tax collections through the month of August fell by 18% from a similar period last year to 93.5 billion shillings. According to the Moody's report released on Wednesday, 60% of Kenya's 108 sovereign rating actions have been negative, a higher proportion than 20% in 2019 and 30% in 2018. Moody's attributes the negative score to the country's rising financing risks posed by large gross borrowing requirements, including amortization of external bilateral debt and need to refinance a large stock of short-term domestic debt. Moody's expects COVID-19 to continue weakening Kenya's fiscal balance in the current financial year as weaker revenue collection and fiscal measures in response to the pandemic delay fiscal consolidation.
Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization is stepping up its crossbreeding program in a bid to boost beef production as well as improve the quality of livestock. KALRO Director General Dr. Eliud Kiriga says the crossbreeding exercise targets livestock farmers in arid and semi-arid lands and has the potential to bridge the annual beef production deficit of 40,000 metric tons.
The beef industry is the largest contributor to agricultural GDP in Kenya, at an estimate of 36%, especially in the arid and semi-arid lands, where beef production is a main economic activity.
We are producing about 260,000 metric tons of beef, but we are importing another 300,000 metric tons. So it means that we have a lot of room to produce more.
However, demand for beef has overtaken supply, with the country's annual beef production standing at 260,000 metric tons against a demand of 300,000 metric tons. This has in turn occasioned the need for importation.
What we are doing as KALRO to bridge that gap is, one, ensuring that the livestock that the farmers have are managed properly so that they can maximize production. Secondly, this center has been providing breeding bulls to farmers in the arid and semi-arid areas for them to be able to improve their productivity.
In efforts to boost beef production, the Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization is stepping up its cross-breeding program to improve the quality of livestock.
Wanakosa maji, wanakosa chakula ya kutosha, na hatuna mbinu mingi ya kutengeneza chakula, ilikuwa mpaka mifugo wengine nyingi zinakufa. Lakini sasa tunashukuru tumefundishwa.
Kwa tunajua ni kufuga ng'ombe tu kawaida na kupeleka sokoni. Lakini wakati huu tunajua kwamba tumepatiwa ule ujuzi ambao tunaweza kufanyisha kwamba mifugo yetu iwe na bei nzuri na iwe tunaikuza vizuri.
Dr. Krieger says the first phase will target herders in ourselves.
And part of the training that we are giving farmers today here is to ensure that the livestock that they have are disease-free so that they can be able to fetch a better market outside the country.
Under the program, over 35 groups from Tana River County will benefit from the beef value chain production training. Regina Manyara reporting for Channel 1 Business.
On to the field now. Nairobi County Government has asked the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission to fast-track the release of a report on the alleged corruption acts in construction of Dandora Stadium in order for construction works to be completed in the stalled project. The contractor left the site while work on the stadium was 80% done after being flagged by the EACC officials for allegedly using substandard materials in construction.
Dandora Stadium, a 3,000-seater facility, was a project that was launched by Nairobi Governor Mike Sonko as part of his contribution to sports in the county. But work on the stadium remains incomplete 2 years on. The contractor left the site while work on the stadium was almost done after being flagged by Ethics and Anti-Corruption EACC officials for allegedly using substandard materials in construction. The Nairobi County government is now calling on EACC to fast-track the release of a report on the alleged corruption acts.
The project can be completed. Many of our stadiums are constrained, and many young people lack facilities that are up to international standard where they can be undertaking their sporting activities. So the whole problem is really with the investigations. If they can conclude that and give the green light for the continuation, that stadium was already 90% done. It would not even take 3 months before now it can be occupied. But it means like the tufts, you saw the grass tufts and the seats and many other utilities that are within the facility have been destroyed so far.
Meanwhile, the county government has confirmed that City Stadium will be enhanced to a 40,000-seat stadium as refurbishment works already begun. Frederick Moki for Channel 1 Sports.
Now, Harambee Stars head coach Jacob Ghost Mulee has said his team will pull a surprise win in the return leg of the Africa Cup of Nations qualifier match against Comoros this Sunday. The Stars were held to a 1-1 draw at Kasarani Stadium last night in the first leg encounter.
Well, I think the game went as per plan because Komoro, first of all, you have to know that's a good team. I mean, they lead the table. However, we were here to try and stop them from moving ahead. In that, we created a lot of chances in the second half when they had one man down. But we just couldn't make use of our many chances that we created. But all in all, I'm satisfied with the effort that the boys have put. Because Moroni is a very difficult hunting ground. However, we will still compose ourselves and try to prepare because we leave on Friday to see if we can be able to turn the tables.
The 2020-2021 Kenyan Premier League season, which was set to kick off next week, will have to wait for a longer time as Football Kenya Federation has not been given the go-ahead by the government. FKF Chairman Nick Mwendwa says they will launch another bid to the Ministry of Sports in order for the top-tier league to resume.
Football Kenya Federation FKF Governing Council had confirmed the upcoming 2020-2021 season will kick off starting 20th of this month. But that would only happen if the government gives the federation the green light to have the top-tier leagues resume. FKF chairman Nick Mwendwa has said they will launch another bid to the Ministry of Sports and Health to allow resumption of football activities.
We plan to start on 21st. The government has not told us what to do. We want to start because the sponsors need to pay and the boys need some money. We've been pushing for this. We will push again next week to try and see if we can start on 21st. Hopefully we can start because we are putting in place what is required to make sure we can start and play. And so let's see what the government says.
The FKF General Council had proposed to commence the league because beyond the proposed dates, it will be impossible for it to commence and complete. 9 matches were already planned to be played should the league start on Friday next week. Frederick Moki for Channel 1 Sports.
Well, that is where we close Channel 1 Business Insight this particular evening. Thank you very much for your valued company, for also tweeting as well as just speaking to us on Facebook. My name is Betty Kiptum, and Byron Abuli has been my colleague on the sign language interpretation. Do have yourself a good night and enjoy the rest of your viewing. Bye-bye.
Good evening and a very warm welcome to Channel 1 Weather Updates. My name is Irene Mchuma Odem. Thursday it is, and the Lake Basin region is currently experiencing showers accompanied by thunderstorms. These are weather patterns that are also stretching towards the western parts of the country. The rest of the country is currently experiencing scattered wet conditions, and that is how the night will be. Tomorrow, we're waking up to sunny intervals over most parts of the country, unlike what we experienced today. In the capital, it will mainly be sunny during the morning hours. There will be rains in Meru and Nyeri during the early morning hours, and also cloudy weather conditions will characterize most of the areas in those two regions. The coastal strip, Lamu, Mombasa, Malindi will experience scattered showers. Machakos, Makindu, Voi will experience rains during the morning hours. The northeastern parts of the country and the northwestern parts of the country will mainly experience sunny intervals, but there will be rains along the border of Kenya and South Sudan, and it will rain in Kisumu in the afternoon. This region and western parts of the country will experience showers accompanied by thunderstorms over several places. The other parts of the country will continue to experience sunny intervals. The southeastern lowlands, Machakos, Makindu, Voi will mainly be sunny. The capital will be cloudy. Meru and Nyeri will experience showers over a few places, and especially over mountainous areas such as Mount Kenya and Aberdare. The coastal strip will experience a reduction of wet conditions from what you had during the morning hours. Temperatures, the capital, we are still at 8 highs of 24 degrees Celsius, just like today. The highest temperatures across the country will be experienced in Lodwar, and that will stand at 35 degrees Celsius. And for you in Mandera, be prepared for highs of 31 degrees Celsius. Time for us to cross the borders and have a look at the international forecasts. Let's do this again tomorrow. God